welcome. Good afternoon or good morning or good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to our webinar, Don't Get Left Behind, Key Insights for the Transition from SIM to eSIM in Mobile Device Testing. So, right after giving a little bit of motivation why we're doing this webinar and a little bit of introduction, we will immediately then dive into the subject matter. But first of all, let me tell you a little bit why we are doing this webinar. Of course, the evolution towards eSIM is underway. I think you see this. You see more and more devices being launched in market with eSIM capabilities, and more operators are supporting this. And irrespective of this, of course, mobile device testing is well established. Since many years, it's relying on trusted certification bodies like the GCF and PTCRB with a focus on US. And part of this is the verification of the compliance to the agreed technical standards for the mobile devices to prevent from any issues in the networks and for the customers. However, what we see is that if we move to testing of eSIM devices, a lot of aspects will be different in the future than they have been compared to the SIM-based devices. And this regards how testing can be conducted from a technical perspective, what testing scope can be achieved, and then also how confident are the test results and what you can derive from them and the limiting factors for this. So all this is not set in stone yet. It's a work in progress activity, and we come to the stages and what's going on there in a couple of minutes. But we wanted to provide transparency in a very early stage already to you, in order for you to be able to prepare yourself for what's coming and potentially to involve yourself, because you may have an opinion on this, your own, and you may want to address this opinion. So let's do a quick introduction. It's not just me, it's also my colleague Arne for today. Arne, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Okay, so my name is Arne Markwort. I work as a principal technical consultant for Comprion for now 21 years. And I'm attending here as I am involved in development of the relevant test specification in 3GPP and ANSI.
Yeah, thanks, Arne. I myself, Markus Dormans, I'm doing a mixture of innovation, business development, product management in Comprion. And Comprion, for those who don't know it, we are a German-based company. We are specialized on tools and test solutions for the mobile industry. Mobile device testing is one of our core areas, and that's why we're doing this webinar today. But also we have a focus on everything related to SIM and eSIM. So we're talking about the intersection of the two today. And then we have a lot of tools and test solutions for the NFC interface. A little bit of housekeeping, just for you to know, a recording at the slides will become available on our webpage of the company in the next coming days. Questions, of course, are highly welcome. We want to handle this in the way that you type in the questions into the GoToWebinar tool. In this tool in the menu, you will see a questions area, and please feel free to type in your question already during the presentation. Don't wait towards the end. However, we will then address the questions towards the end, so we will go through the questions one by one and hopefully provide you with good answers. Yeah, but as said, highly welcome, and don't wait for the end to type in your questions. Perfect. Hope this makes sense for you. So then let's dive into the content. So first of all, what is this about, what we're talking? So mobile device testing covers a lot of aspects, and we want to focus on what is called the USIM/USAT mobile device testing. This is exactly the piece where all the dependencies and all the features which depend on the SIM card in the past and the eSIM nowadays and in the future, and the configuration of the SIM or the eSIM, which is called the eSIM profile, comes to light and place. Means this is about testing of various features and functions of the device which are somehow eSIM related and related to the configuration in the eSIM profile. And what this is about, you need to ensure and you want to ensure that the interaction between the eSIM and the modem in the device works properly. So that is the interface labeled with the number 1 on the left-hand side. And one option, of course, is to do so that you check the data on the radio interface to ensure the consequential behavior is as expected, depending on what is happening on the eSIM, what you have configured in the eSIM profile. And in order to test the various functions and features of the device, of course, you need to change the configurations in the eSIM profile. It means during the testing, during all the test cases you run through, you need to run through various eSIM profile configurations to see the different results related to the different test cases. This is what mobile device testing with a focus on the eSIM, so the USIM USAT mobile device testing is about. So how does the testing ecosystem looks like as of today, and who plays a role in this? Again, a focus on the USIM USAT mobile device testing. First of all, on the left-hand side, of course, the OEMs, the device manufacturers, have stakes in testing. Obviously, they test themselves for quality assurance of the products they are launching. And for this, they use, on the one hand side, their own test cases, but also complemented by the standardized test cases in the standardized test specification. So complementary to the technical specifications of the mobile device, there are a lot of test specifications which list dedicated test cases. Same as the technical specs, they come from 3GPP and from the ETSI, for example. Yeah, so of course, that's what OEMs do to ensure that they have a proper device. Secondly, the OEMs also run their devices through the official conformance testing programs of GCF and PTCRB, which uses then the standardized test specification, which builds on the standardized test specifications, where GCF and PTCRB have built and defined their own testing scope based on the available test specifications. And the reason, or one of the reasons why OEMs do so, is that this is very important for the mobile network operators, because mobile network operators, to a large extent, rely on the results of the industry conformance testing programs to be sure that the devices do not cause problems in their networks, but also do not cause problems for their customers. Of course, few operators still do own testing and run own qualifications programs, partially also based on the standardized test cases, potentially attended by some own test cases. But this is shrinking over time, and the conformance testing programs from GCF and PTCRB, for example, have been kicked off exactly to prevent from the situation that each and every operator needs to test itself. Yeah, it substitutes what operators in the past have done very extensively, testing themselves. And in the meantime, most operators rely on the results from GCF and PTCRB. So what's now changing if we move to, sorry, that was too fast. If we move from SIM card-based devices to eSIM devices. As I pointed out, a lot of this happens on the interface between the eSIM and the modem in the device. However, this interface cannot be physically monitored anymore. Yeah? The eSIM is soldered in the device. There is no way that you can somehow monitor this interface anymore. This is what has been done for mobile device testing when it was about SIM cards. Yeah? You can pull out the SIM card and put an adapter in between the SIM card and the device, and you could monitor the interface. That's not possible anymore. Secondly, I mentioned that we need to run through a sequence of eSIM test profiles with different configurations for the different test cases. And that means that you need to be able to change the eSIM profile or load a sequence of eSIM test profiles to the device step by step. What is possible, or what was possible in the past, to connect the device to a SIM card simulator, which does all these configuration changes, is not possible anymore. It means you need to think about how to set up a new mechanism to step by step move from one configuration of the eSIM profile to the next configuration of the eSIM profile, which is relevant for the next test case. So, and this is what is then decisive for how testing looks like in the future. And the industry and the people in the standardization bodies thinking about test specifications have thought about options for new test methodologies which can be applied because the physical interface between the SIM and the modem is not available anymore. And they came up with three options. The first one is called implicit testing. Implicit testing means you configure something on the eSIM profile, a certain configuration of the communication service. You execute some test procedures, and you look at the data on the radio interface. So you check the data on the radio interface to verify the correctness, to verify whether the data you see there is as expected. Means that is something which looks pretty simple, and it is to some extent, because it does not need to interfere with anything in the device. It doesn't need any special capabilities of the device or something else. So it looks pretty attractive test methodology, but we will see the caveats in a few minutes. Besides this, the industry came up with two additional test methodologies. The first one is called the toolkit event-based testing. That is depending on a dedicated SIM applet, so a little bit of functionality, a little bit of software on the SIM or on the eSIM in that case. And this generates specific events and traces the events from the eSIM perspective related to the communication towards the modem. And this data set, which is traced there by the applet, you can download it or you can extract it from the device and check it afterwards and see whether the traced events and activities there are correct according to what you expected. Yeah, means you need to have this SIM applet on the card that it works. Means there are some prerequisites that you can apply this toolkit event-based testing, but it is an option. And the third one is what is called seamless testing, and that even more depends on the device. It requires that the device or the chipset manufacturer implement some kind of logging capability of the interface between the eSIM and the baseband or the modem. Yeah, this is in the past there was no dependency on the device or chipset manufacturer because you could just put a probe in the middle between the SIM card and the device. But nowadays, if you want to do the seamless testing, you depend on the device or chipset manufacturer that they implement this capability in the device, and that the data can be extracted from the device afterwards and analyzed. And of course, if this is possible, if you trace the data, if you create a log file, then you can afterwards check the data for correctness and check if everything is according to your expected outcome. So these are the three test methodologies which the experts have defined as options. And this is what we are, or what the industry is playing with now to come up with a test methodology, test specification, compliance frameworks, and all this. So most advanced are the discussions in the 3GPP, although this is also still work in progress. It's not yet done. But the 3GPP is working on two new test specifications for the USIM, for the USAT. It's on the way, but still in early stages. And yeah, Comprion, our company, is one of the major contributors there. So we are really looking into this because eventually we want to be able to deliver test solutions based on this. The intention, of course, is facilitate tests which are similar to the ones which have been defined in the previous test specifications for USIM and for USAT when it was about SIM card-based devices. So that's the ideal situation or the intention, do a like-for-like substitution or complement compared to what we have seen in the SIM card world in the past. The ETSI, we mentioned this also, ETSI is working on test specification in general for this. ETSI is not that advanced yet. There are so far no real activities or no formal activities kicked off in ETSI for test specifications for the new eSIM world, but that's probably going to happen sooner or later. Yeah, but what we see now and the discussions we can report from in this webinar is mainly related to the activities and discussions going on in 3GPP. So let's drill a little bit into the details of what this all means for the test cases and how they can be executed. Now it becomes a little bit more difficult, and I hope I can bring this across that you understand. So let's see what this means. Let's assume you will have a test specification from 3GPP, but later on then also from ETSI. And this test specification will have a number of test cases, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. Of course, there are some test cases, the one labeled here with a Y and a Z, which cannot be covered at all by these test methodologies. In particular, the ones for the electrical situation. So, yeah, there are some test cases for which we will not be able to define a test case for the eSIM world as we did it for the SIM-based world. Yeah, and in particular, if it's about electrical test cases, I think you will get this. The eSIM is soldered, the interface is not available anymore. So that's not possible. But it's not just the electrical test cases, also some other test cases are simply not possible anymore from a technical perspective. So then let's move on and see what else is impacted by the eSIM. We said that the implicit testing, where you just have a configuration in the profile and then look at the data on the radio interface and try to compare things, that this seems to be attractive because it doesn't require any prerequisites in the device or the chipset or the eSIM. Yes, that's right. However, if you look at the different test cases and what the intention is of these test cases, you come to the conclusion that implicit testing is only meaningful for less than 50% of the test cases which we have been used to in the past for the SIM cards. And if it's not about the 3GPP test specs and the test cases, but ETSI, it's even worse. It's even significantly more than 50%. Yeah, so it means technically, yes, you can apply implicit testing, but there are test cases for which this does not result in any meaningful outcome you can trust on. So that's something you have in mind. Implicit testing not possible for all test cases. Let's move on. Secondly, is noteworthy that even where implicit testing is possible, the obtained results are often or sometimes not fully reliable. Means the result which you see could happen or could be caused by different kinds of behaviors of the eSIM, of the modem, of the interaction between the two. And there might be cases where you see a correct result on the radio interface, on the data of the radio interface, but this is just an artifact, but the interaction was not happening properly, but you don't see this. Means you cannot rely on the implicit testing alone, and it would be better to, in addition to implicit testing, also run the test cases based on the seamless or the toolkit event-based testing methodology, just to have more reliable test results you can really trust on. Yeah. So that's also noteworthy. Let's move on. We mentioned already, yes, the toolkit event-based and the seamless testing methodology is what we like to see in complement to the implicit one, but it simply depends on the devices or the chipset or the eSIM vendors to support this. Yeah, the logging of the interface between the eSIM and the modem, or having the applet which does all the testing and the logging of the events on the eSIM, and the ability to extract the data from there to analyze it later on. So that puts some requirements on the device, the chipset, or the eSIM vendor. Means that is probably also a challenge and something which you need to look at. In particular, because it is not a given that each device and and each SIM card, eSIM, embedded in a device will support both or even not one of the two test methodologies, the toolkit event-based methodology or the seamless methodology. So if you look at the broader device portfolio, you will see that some devices support the toolkit event-based methodology, some others the seamless, maybe some both, but some devices will probably support none of them. At least this is an option space which we need to be aware of. That is simply how the situation will look like in the future. So if we combine this all together, the conclusion is there is a high risk that the test case coverage is fragmented across different kinds of devices. The testing scope in general is limited and smaller than it was in the past for SIM-based devices, and or that the reliability of the test results is not that strong as it was in the past for SIM-based devices. So that is a situation which is likely going to happen. Of course, what we cannot be cleared at the moment is how bad or how good things will be. So means how many devices will support how many test methodologies, for example. So that's something we will only know once we see the devices, once we are more down the road in the process where the 3GPP defines the test specifications, but also where GCF, PTCRB define their compliance frameworks, and where we will see what device vendors and the eSIM manufacturers will deliver. But that's a risk, and for sure it will kick in. I think the extent to what it will kick in, that is something which is of question as of today. So I hope that was clear where or what situation is ahead of us. And I would like to take the opportunity to put a question in front of you, because we are interested to see what you think about this. So for you, probably there are two options. The first one is you would be keen on having a testing scope which is comparable to what we could do for the SIM-based devices, and that also the reliability of the outcome of the test is similar, has a similar strength than the SIM-based devices. And you would like to see that somehow the industry finds a way to support these test methodologies which are needed for this. The second option, of course, is you could say, look, that's okay for me. I don't think it's so important, so relevant. A reduced testing scope, not knowing to what level it will be reduced, but in general, a reduced testing scope is okay. So our GoToWebinar tool gives us the opportunity to ask you for a real-time opinion, and that's what I want to do now. I want to start a poll, and then we will share the aggregated results in 2 minutes with all of you. So let me select the poll, 1 second. This is the one. And let me launch the poll. Right. And now you see the poll, the questions in front of you. And it would be great if you could click the one or the other option. And I'll wait just a minute or so to see what your opinion looks like. And then we will look at this. Yeah, more and more opinions come in. Yeah, we're still seeing more. Let's give it another 15 seconds. And then let's look at the result. It's just a quick snapshot. Interesting for you, but of course also interesting for us what people think about this. Okay, I think the minute is over. Let me close the poll and let's look at the results. And we share the results. Okay. So, yeah, the big majority of you thinks that we should try to find a way in the industry to have a very solid and comprehensive testing scope also for the eSIM devices, more or less comparable to what was available for the SIM card based devices. And yeah, there are some of you, but fewer people which think that a reduced testing scope is okay. Yeah, thanks a lot for your contribution here and for your opinion. That's very helpful and very insightful. So let's move on with the presentation, with the content. So let me go back to the slides. Here we go. And the next one. So that was the situation of the test cases and what can be tested and how can it be tested. And now I would move on to the second topic, which is how can I set the different configurations in the eSIM profile so that I can run through the different configurations which are required for the different test cases step by step in order to really execute the tests. As said in the past, when it was about SIM cards, there was an option to have a SIM card simulator. That's not possible anymore. So what's possible now? So yeah, of course, you can create a dedicated eSIM test profile or sequence of test profiles. That's possible. The tools are available. The technology is standardized. And there are tools and technologies defined as part of the remote SIM provisioning specifications from the GSMA to load a test profile to a device or to a card, where we need to make a differentiation whether it's a test device or a commercial off-the-shelf device, because both will be on different security levels, which means that different types of tools with different characteristics are required to load a profile to a commercial off-the-shelf device or to a pure test device. And then, of course, it's not necessary, essentially, that you always load a new test profile step by step by step, but you can take one test profile and then do some incremental changes of the configurations over the air before maybe a bigger change is necessary, or you need to do some kind of reset to a test profile or in a status where you then really need to load a fully fledged new test profile. So that's these are the functionalities which you need to be able to implement and to provide as part of your end-to-end test solution. And the good thing on the one hand side is, yeah, it's not just that the technology has been specified, but also tools are available to do so. So these are the tools which Comprion would provide, but of course you can build your own tools, or there might be some other tools in the industry. But the good message is, first of all, is for running through these steps, for doing what is necessary, the technology is available and tools are available which can be used to get this done. The technologies are, for example, if you want to do the incremental updates of the configurations on the profile, there are two options. You can do it with something which is called the AT+CSIM. For devices which support this, not all devices support this. On the other hand, an option is to do over-the-air remote file and application management. So that's a second technology you could use. Both is available. Tools for both are available, and yeah, you have a choice which to utilize. As said, depends also on what is supported by the device. For loading the profiles to a device, as said, the GSMA has defined the eSIM specifications, which covers the remote SIM provisioning. So the interfaces, the procedures are defined. There is this one technology, and that's available for the test devices as well as for commercial off-the-shelf devices. So far that looks brilliant. However, there's always the devil in the details somewhere. Means not all devices can be covered by these methodologies and by these kind of tools. And there are, for example, 3 exceptions. One exceptions are the so-called M2M or machine-to-machine devices. And there's a specific GSMA remote SIM provisioning specifications for these type of devices. And this technical specification is defined in a way which doesn't allow us to just take a device and load a profile from the site, from a test tool, for example, whether it's provided by Comprion or somebody else, but to provide it or to provide a test profile from a second source for testing purposes. The M2M device is always one-to-one connected, hardwired to a very specific remote SIM provisioning backend service. And if this one is not providing a test profile, there's no chance to intercept this. It's no chance to come up with a test tool to get access to the device to load a test profile. So there's a little bit light on the horizon, because there is a new specification for so-called IoT devices, which the GSMA is working on at the moment, which more or less will substitute the M2M spec, which will simplify things. But as I said, this is only on the horizon. It will still take a little bit of time until this materializes in terms of approved specifications and then products in the market. As of today, the M2M devices come with this challenge here. Secondly, there are devices which require more than just the GSMA standardized remote SIM provisioning servers, like an entitlement server. Let's not go into detail what an entitlement server is, but means if you want to load a test profile to such devices, then you do not just need simulations of the remote SIM provisioning servers, but you somehow would need to find a way to also provide these other components like an entitlement server. And for a number of reasons, there is no solutions of this today. The good message maybe is that this only applies to very few devices. In the portfolio, most devices really can be, or for most devices, you can load a test profile on these devices with just the GSMA standardized remote SIM provisioning servers, and no need for something else which you cannot provide. And last but not least, there are of course devices with preloaded operator eSIM profiles, which do not support any kind of remote SIM provisioning capabilities. Yeah, these are IoT devices, Wi-Fi routers with 5G connectivity, for example. These kind of devices where the vendor of the device decided to not just deliver a naked device and leave it up to the customer to select the tariff with an operator and then to load the eSIM profile to the device, but the vendor has decided to supply the combination of a device and the data tariff based on an eSIM profile. So when the device is shipped, the eSIM profile is on the eSIM already, and if it comes if it goes into the customer's hand, there is no way to load a new profile onto the device. Means also there's no way to load a test profile onto the device. So that is a challenge, of course, and there are devices which we will not be able to address because we cannot load a test profile onto them. So these are some caveats. Again, how worse it is means how many devices are limited by these kind of aspects. That's something that we will see over time. But all of these three factors are real-world challenges. They do exist in devices today, and they will cause some challenges for the industry for a broad testing scope across devices. Last but not least, there's one question, of course, is, as said today, we do mobile device testing based on SIM cards. That's what you see on the left-hand side of this table. And of course, also no surprise, there is no test specification, no test case yet defined for embedded SIMs or integrated SIMs. This is not tested at all. For the future, we have, of course, a couple of options. In theory, we could leave it like it is and say, hey, let's only test the interaction in the device between the modem and the SIM card, as long as it is a hybrid device and not an eSIM only device, and forget about to test the interaction with the eSIM and the iSIM. You could just argue, hey, this is what we have done before. Yeah, there are already eSIM-based devices or hybrid devices in market, which entered the market without that the eSIM has been tested. So why deviating from this? On the other hand, the other extreme situation, you could say, look, eSIM is the future, and let's focus on testing based on the interaction between the modem and the eSIM, and let's forget about the SIM cards. The SIM card is technology from yesterday. Let's focus only on the eSIM. And last but not least, also, of course, you could be on the opinion that you say, look, eventually, I don't know whether my customer will plug a SIM card into the device or whether my customer will use an eSIM profile to provision a tariff of an operator on the device. But eventually, the device needs to work properly in both cases. So I need to test both cases for a hybrid device. I need to test, run through the test cases which check the interaction based on the SIM card, as well as the interaction with the eSIM or iSIM chip. So again, that's open. That's an open discussion. What I depict here is just the option space, and there's no decision yet what we will see in the future. But again, I'm keen on also understanding your preference for this, and would like to go for another quick poll with you, which means if it's about hybrid devices, means devices which come with a SIM slot plus an eSIM chip, how would you like to see these devices testing, depending on the interaction between the modem and the eSIM or the SIM card? Means, should we test based on the interaction with the traditional SIM card only? Should we move to testing with the eSIM only and forget about the SIM card? Should we test both to be most comprehensive? Or, of course, you say, look, I don't care. I would consider to run certain test cases related to the eSIM myself if it's not going to be covered in the compliance framework. So I don't care. I will ensure a comprehensive testing scope myself if the testing scope, what is done by the compliance frameworks, is only done in a partial way. So that's a question which I would like to push to you. And again, let me start the poll. Same as we have done before. 1 second. I need to do it on the tool. Here we go, and we launch the poll. Right. You see the question and the options. And let's take a minute or so. And I would highly appreciate if you could give us your perspective on this. Yeah, so answers are coming in. I have the advantage to already see where the focus is, and you will see this in a minute. You're quite quick in voting this time. You have quite good coverage of the audience already. So let's wait for another 10 seconds or so before we close the poll. Okay, let's close the poll, and the result is pretty clear. It's interesting. Okay, it's closed, and let me share the result. Okay, here we go. So the majority of you actually would like to see a testing scope in the compliance framework which covers the SIM and the eSIM interaction both, so the fully comprehensive testing scope. Some of you would be okay with only testing based on the eSIM, and I think no one would be happy if we would just continue to test the interaction with the SIM card and simply ignore the eSIM. So that's, let's say, very forward-looking and interesting, and also encouraging for us to see what you would like to see happening in the future in these conformance testing frameworks. So thanks for your input. So what does it mean and what's happening next? As said, all what I've tried to explain is subject to discussions in the working groups in the standardization areas. And let's move back to the slides. Here we go. And also the discussion between the working group working on test specifications in the 3GPP and then the GCF, for example, which need to make up their minds how they want to leverage the existing test specs for the SIM card, the new test specs which are emerging for the eSIM, how they want to leverage it for compliance testing framework going forward. So what is the scope of the compliance testing? What's the role of this? Do we think it's important? Do we think it's less important? And how do we think as an industry, as an ecosystem, that should compare to what we are used to do in the past in these compliance testing frameworks? Also, what we discussed a few minutes ago, how should we test the hybrid SIM devices with the SIM and with the eSIM? But also then the question, of course, what do we expect from the device, the chipset, the eSIM manufacturers? How will they support, or how should they support the different test methodologies, which decide eventually whether we can get a good testing scope, a good coverage, or a smaller one. So that's something which is going to be discussed. Discussing is still starting. The industry players from the different areas participate in this, device manufacturers, the eSIM manufacturers, the mobile network operators, of course, and that is an active discussion which will take quite some time to draw a conclusion for this, and it will be interesting to see what's the outcome of this. And of course, we do have an opinion from a Comprion perspective, which probably is not a surprise for you. So our position is, let's try to find a way to define a testing framework which leads to reliable results as much as possible, and as good as possible means also with a testing scope as broad as possible and as we are used to from the former SIM cards times. As I said, probably not a surprise for you that this is our opinion. And this is, of course, what guides our contributions to the industry. For example, what Arne is doing in the working groups or in the 3GPP. And what's, of course, interesting for us, and thanks for sharing your opinion a little bit during the polls here. What's your position? That's, of course, interesting because we are just a small company and we are just one player. So the discussion is driven by players from different areas, by many players, and the outcome will be driven by what the majority wants eventually and what the majority can do. So yeah, feel free to define your own position. Feel free to think about how you can contribute to the discussion, how you want to become part of the discussion. That's exactly what we mentioned at the beginning, why we're doing this webinar, to give you a little bit of transparency in order for you to make up your mind and to decide how you want to behave and how you want to position yourself. So once all this is decided, which is still in the limbo, then of course it will have implications on test solutions. Just very briefly to let you know what also from a company who's providing test solution, what it means. So on the left-hand side of this table, you see the different functionalities what a test solution needs to cover typically. So you have something to do the test plan and test case management. You need to do the device under test preparation. You need to execute then the test cases step by step. You need to evaluate the data which comes out of the testing. You need to prepare your results and do the log file handling and eventually compile a comprehensive test report for this. And then, of course, also you want to do some device cleanup. So that's what you typically cover in any kind of test solution, whoever provides this. And on the right-hand side, you see what is probably now not new to you any longer, what changes will be. Yeah, for the device under test preparation, we need to find a way to load test profiles onto the device. And we've seen, yes, there are tools and technologies available, but also there are some challenges. And also we need to find a way to do incremental updates and modifications. And also challenge, we need to be able to do this in an automated way. Yeah, most of the ones using test solutions, you want to run through the test cases in an automated way without manual interference of an operator. For the test execution, we have seen that there are 3 methodologies, and probably we need to implement all test methodologies, because some test cases will only rely on this test methodology, some on the other hand, on the other one. But even if, for example, this this implicit testing is possible, you want to improve your reliability of your results by adding the test case based on the second test methodology from SIM applets or from the device logging capability. And you need to have the capabilities to extract the data from the SIM applets and from the log files, which are implemented by the device vendors. And furthermore, these technical capabilities for these two testing methodologies, which rely on the SIM applets or for the chipset or device manufacturer to create a log file, they will be most likely be implemented in multiple different ways from operator to operator in different flavors. So that makes it a little bit more difficult for companies providing test solutions, because you will need to implement different flavors depending on whether a device from vendor A or from vendor B is going to be tested. So that's the challenge for us in particular, but we don't want to complain a lot. Of course, you can rely on Comprion, for example, and we can expect that we will also provide test solutions or next generation versions of our test solutions, which we already delivered for the SIM card based devices on the standardized test specifications for the eSIM based devices. We will continue to contribute to the working groups where all this is defined. As said, we are core part of these working groups. We do have an opinion, and we ingest this opinion into the working groups. And we will continue to provide test solutions together with our network simulator partners, Anritsu and Rohde & Schwarz. So that's what you can expect from us going forward. So you will see products in that area coming to market. Okay, that's it what I wanted to share with you. I hope it was clear, and I hope you understood and you have an idea of what's happening in the industry in relationship to this mobile device testing topic for eSIM based devices. And yeah, we're coming to an end at least regarding the content. And we will go through your questions in a minute. But of course, before closing, also I wanted to mention that we of course are more than happy to continue the discussion. If you have interest to continue the discussion with us, you can contact me if you want. You see my email there. You will find me on LinkedIn if you want. So just drop me an email or a LinkedIn message, and then we can continue the discussion also afterwards. But for now, let's see if there are any questions.
Yeah, we have a few.
Right. Let me read out the questions, and then, yeah, I think Arne is the best position to give you the answers. So number one, our customers need testing cellular devices with eSIM. How should they manage to get test profiles loaded on devices without a camera or QR code? Without a camera, so your QR code cannot be used. Okay, Arne, any idea?
This is more your part, I guess. And I think we tried to answer this in the presentation already.
Yeah, so if there's no camera, probably it's a kind of IoT device or machine-to-machine device. Means there's no option maybe to enter what is called an activation code, which is equivalent to the QR code, but something you don't need to scan with a camera, something you can type in. That is one option. Some devices have the ability to connect to a companion device, which could be a smartphone, and then piggyback on the camera, for example, from the smartphone to scan the QR code and to facilitate the device to load a profile. And if it's really an M2M device, according to this M2M specification for remote SIM provisioning, then yes, it will not come with a camera, but there is no way we could facilitate to load a test profile to these devices. This is something where, unfortunately, we would need to tell you there's no option. That is a discussion you would need to have with the device manufacturer, if they can facilitate this, or with the operator who provides the remote SIM provisioning service for this device, whether this operator is able to provide a test profile, the required test profile for the device. Okay, let's move on. Are the test scope covered eSIM IoT and eSIM M2M? So I think this question refers to the two different specifications for the remote SIM provisioning. My understanding is that, Arne, what you're discussing in the working group, that is independent of the remote SIM provisioning, whether it's for an IoT device or M2M device, correct?
Yeah, completely. So from the 3GPP perspective, we just look at how these tests can be executed, what data is needed, what will be the best method to do that, and this is how the test cases are structured. So we don't care. And whenever you are able to transfer a profile and to run a test in whatever configuration from the 3GPP world, you're fine.
Okay. Next one. Is there a way to test the electricity, e.g. the voltage? Arne. I think we would love to, right? But
currently in ETSI, in release 17, there is a definition for class D for not removable cards. So this now will make it to the test specification in short term. But the only way to handle that is if the devices that have such a non-removable card at least are not really non-removable. So if they follow the defined MFF form factors, then they can be adapted to a test system. If this is not possible, no, we can't do electrical testing.
Right, and I think the next one is a comment to this one. Sometimes the terminal profile says 3 volts. When it's running 1.8 volts, does a patch to misinterpret that right is needed?
At least in looking at ETSI testing, there are a few different things that are tested. So for example, if the card is stating to accept 1.8 and 3 volt and the terminal is somehow capable to do both, it shall use either of the voltages. If it can do just one and card is supporting 2 voltages, then the supported one shall be used, so that's not a big issue. And if there is no understanding between card and device, then at least no data transfer shall be there. But looking at integrated systems, I think this is the worst solution. If something like that would happen, there has been no communication between card vendor and device vendor in the very beginning.
Right. Okay, one more question. As we can see, different device manufacturers have different LPA USAT implementation. Do you have any solution? Yeah, maybe Arne, you can start, and maybe I have also some ideas.
Yeah, I think this is more your part, so you shall have the ideas. As just said, from 3GPP and ETSI point of view, we don't really care for that. Preparation part is not part of the defined testing.
Yeah. So on the LPA side, I'm pretty relaxed. Yes, there will be different LPA implementations. My strong assumption is that they will comply to the technical specification of GSMA. So as long as they comply, it's fine. They can be different, but they need to be standard compliant, and then it's fine. Different USIC implementation. Yeah, that's right, of course. There are different vendors and different specifications for UICC. And that's, of course, one of the reasons why we think that the interaction between the modem and the UICC should be tested, because it's not the one-size-fits-all UICC. There are different vendors, different models according to different specifications or different versions of the specifications. And also, what we have pointed out, there is one test methodology which puts some requirements to the UICC. It was the SIM applet, the one. Yeah, means this is where we rely on the UICC, which is integrated in the device, to support this test methodology. If it does so, great. If it does not, this test methodology cannot be used. And that is, of course, something which is up to the UICC manufacturer to take a decision to support or not support such a test methodology. From our perspective, we can, of course, make transparent what it means if such a test methodology is supported by the UICC or not. But that is a product feature which is controlled by the UICC manufacturer, and they will make up their mind what they think is best.
Yeah, perhaps a short status. So in 3GPP, we think that the event-driven testing will be established someday, but currently there are some definitions going on in ETSI. So there are events that are just, so the requirements to these events are accepted by ETSI. So it's also there. Card vendors have to make up their mind if these events will be supported, if they will be supported in specific test areas only. So at least a lot of effort and quite good processes defined by Qualcomm for these events, but currently not finally defined in ETSI. So it's still a little vague.
Yeah, you see, that's all still a little bit in the limbo, and I think engagement from various parties is necessary to finalize this and or to drive this to a point where we have a solid solution for all of us. We're coming to an end now. I see here also in the questions one question which asked once more whether the recording and the slides are available later on. So just to recap, yes. We will share the slides and the recording on our webpage. It may take a few days until it's uploaded to the webpage, but probably latest if you come back to our web portal early next week, you will see slides and recording available there. Okay, that's the end from our side. I would like to thank everybody for your attention, and we hope that it was valuable for you and interesting for you. So thanks a lot. And have a good day wherever you are, and hope to see you again in potentially next webinar in the future. Thanks.
Thank you from my side, and have a nice day.
Bye-bye.